I go back 11 years ago, and I was at a table of a man from the church I was attending because he had requested to sit down with me and go over his situation. Because I was a financial guy at that moment, and of course I was a Christian at the same time, so he wanted my perspective on what he found himself in. It is the beginning of 2009, and the financial crisis has hit the Netherlands in all seriousness. So a few years ago, he explained to me, he bought into a share lease product that some reputable Dutch insurance companies and some reputable Dutch banks had issued. And they had wonderful names like Profit Tripler and Profit Booster and stuff like that. And from the year 2000 to 2008, those banks and insurance companies sold 1 million of those share lease products. So it's not like something in a corner, no, this was big scale. And he had bought a few of those contracts. So the insurance company or the bank, they would loan you money, and with that money you would buy reputable shares on the Dutch exchange. And after 7 years, during the 7 years you only paid interest on the loan, and after 7 years all the shares in your basket would be sold, and out of the profit of that sale you would pay back the loan, and you would pocket a nice profit to give you some extra, right? So this is a way that if you don't have money on the shelf to profit from the stock market, this is a way that you still can profit from the stock market without any money from yourself. So this man, he tells me he has closed a few of those contracts with an insurance company because he wanted to become financially independent later on in his life, and he would serve the Lord in ministry without having to have a salary. Quite noble, right? But now, in the years after he bought those share leases, the financial crisis had come and the share market had plummeted. And he was almost at the end of the 7 years. So he would have to sell his little basket of shares. But instead of paying down the loan, there was not even enough money to pay down the loan because the shares have kind of halved. And he would have to pay the insurance company a big sum of money to finalize the contracts and get out of it. So instead of giving him some extra profit, he was looking at a big loss. Now the salesman of the insurance company had told him when he was negotiating the contracts, the guy said, well, for 30 years the stock market has gone up. So there's no way that, in the next 7 years the stock market is going down. But yes way, the stock market did go down. And instead of a profit tripler, it was a loss tripler. And the guy was really crying at my desk. He was disillusioned. He had done this to become financially independent, to serve the Lord. And he was asking me, can I help him in some form or manner? Well, no, not really. The only thing that I could advise him is to sue the insurance company, because they had sold him something without telling him the real dangers. And later on, a lot of the court cases that were brought against the insurance company and the banks, they were decided in favor of the people that took out the contracts, because the banks and the insurance company only told the good news, but not the possible bad news. Actually, he did not have any business investing money in the stock market because he didn't have the money to take the risk that was involved. But this shows us something very important, this story, and we're all susceptible to it. That is that we are prone to wanting to believe what pleases us. We are prone to wanting to believe what pleases us. So the Apostle John, we have read this morning, he tells this audience, test the spirit, whether it is from God or from the world. And he says that in a specific context, which we will look at in a few moments. But on a wider scale, it poses us the question for all of us, what do we base our decisions and beliefs on? What is the ground for our beliefs and decisions? Can we trust the information we base our decisions on? Could the guy have trusted the salesman from the insurance company? Or do we base our decisions on fake news? Fake news, you could define it as information that looks like the real thing, but is adjusted to fit the worldview of the one giving us the information. What are the sources for the information? Does it contain all the facts? Is it a fair reflection on the facts? Or is it the reflection of the one that wants us to believe a certain thing? Is everything that is against our opinion or against what we believe, is everything that speaks against it, is that fake news, which is sometimes said? And these are difficult questions these days. Because as we look in the world around us, there's partisanship and accusations of spreading fake news. We hear that every day. When you see the discussions on Facebook and LinkedIn about the things of today, about corona pandemic and about elections and about politicians, it is very, very polarized. And people call each other names and say all kinds of bad things on social media. That when you read, you go, whoa, what hatred. And what discussion about what is really true or not? Is corona a big fake hype? Or is it a real pandemic? Is it something with which some ill-meaning conspirators, and of course Bill Gates up front, using this to get control of the masses? Or are we truly struggling with a new Spanish flu? No, what do we base our beliefs and our decisions on? Now, we could say a lot about fake news. Where we get our information from. How do we assess whether the information is right or not? Now, I won't go into a lot of detail about it because I want to get to the Bible portion and look at that together. But let me suffice to say that in this world that we're living in, that civility and being cordial and being careful and not villainizing people that have different opinions are always good virtues for Christians throughout all the ages, but especially in the year 2020. I'll say that again. Things like civility, being cordial to people, being careful and not villainizing people that have different opinions. Good virtues. Shall we be a lighting example for that? Now back to John, the portion that we read at the beginning. John is a church leader over a number of churches in Asia Minor, the present-day Turkey. And he is writing to these churches, and we saw a couple of weeks ago that these churches were struggling with people that had come in, and they were teaching something that was totally out of whack what John had taught them before and what the church was founded on. The church, as it was, had solidly believed that Jesus is the Son of God who pre-existed with the Father before creation, and that was born of a virgin, became a human being, lived among us, showed us who God is and how God is. He died for our sin, and he was resurrected from the dead. He was truly God and truly man. Jesus has become flesh. That was the belief of the early church. But then the false teachers came in. And they say, no way that God can become human. Because God is so otherworldly that he cannot have become human. So the Jesus as we knew it was not God. He was just a human being, and maybe he had some special favor of God, but he was just a human being. He was not God. There was no incarnation. Or another version that was also heard was that they said, well, Jesus was God, but he wasn't really human. It cannot be, because God is so otherworldly, and maybe he had the Spirit of God on him, but before Jesus died, that Spirit left, and no incarnation. And that is when John writes in chapter 4, he says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. And this is how you recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit," and spirit is not only like evil spirits or angels. Now, every person, every entity that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. That's a crucial thing that John is bringing across. Jesus Christ, God's Son, has come in the flesh. He became a human being. God shows himself to us in the person of Jesus Christ, God's Son. Now, this teaching that John is talking about here later developed into what we dubbed Gnosticism. And basically, it evolved in an understanding of spirituality, a spirituality that is totally disconnected from real life. You can have wonderful knowledge and gnosis about spiritual stuff on the one hand, and on the other hand, you can sleep around, be promiscuous, cheat on your wife, be a glutton, get drunk in broad daylight, because spiritual things and the things of this world have nothing to do with each other. They're unrelated. Basically, Gnosticism started giving license to the Christians in the early church to have two different worlds that they live in. The spiritual world with gnosis and wonderful spiritual experiences on the one hand, and on the other hand, they just could live the life how they wanted to and be just the same and copycat the world around them with all the behavior. Nice and comfortable. And basically, it goes back with what we said, that we like to believe what we want to believe. The Incarnation, on the other hand, says something different. It tells us what you do in the flesh tells everything about your spirituality. What you do in your everyday life tells everything about what your spiritual experience is. If God finds it important enough to live the life of a human being, then the life of a human being counts to God. He cares about what you do with your life, with your real life. And basically, the whole issue that John is trying to address in this piece has to do with the question if we can box God in a neat religious box on the one hand that is separate from our everyday life in our real life box. Can we do that? No, here's God in a Sunday box. He is the boss. We do religious stuff. We have a religious experience. And then we go back to our normal lives on Monday in the real life box, and we'll just do and decide whatever we want to do and how we want to live our lives. And there's nothing spilling over from the God box into the real life box. That's what Gnosticism is about. Nice, huh? You just don't have to count with the reality of what God is like. No connection between the boxes. And after all, what does God know about all the things in our real life box? He doesn't know about research and development. He has no knowledge of patents and royalties. He doesn't know what debits and credits are and treasury. He doesn't work with computers. He doesn't know about networks and cyber attacks. And he doesn't know about healthcare and ICU. He doesn't know about integrity and Sarbanes-Oxley and corporate accountability, does he? He doesn't know about tax optimization and tax havens. Or does he? Wouldn't it be that the fact that he became flesh and lived among us was so that he knows exactly how it is to be a human being and be confronted with those choices and with those difficulties and with the everyday humdrum that we live in? Might it be that God became human so that he can relate to us, and that we have a high priest, as the letter to Hebrews says, that we have a high priest that went through exactly the same things as we go through also in our 2020? This is how it is translated in the Message. These people, the false teachers, they belong to the Christ-denying world. They talk the world's language, and the world eats it up. But we come from God and belong to God, and anyone who knows God understands us and listens. You see, the world that we live in is fine with us being Christians, as long as we don't let it interfere with our real lives. Then it's okay. As long as we keep our faith contained in the God box, they're okay. But as soon as we stand up and we say, I don't think we should do this because it's not a moral thing to do, or that we say, I think we should do this because it's the right thing to do, and even if it's going to cost us some money, we still have to do it because it's the right thing to do, then people around us start getting worried, like, really? Are you taking your faith that serious that you let this God box start spilling over in your real life box? Yeah, then the rubber meets the road. Then it becomes real, and people will become uncomfortable, like, what do you mean moral compass? What do you mean God and everyday life, they mix up? You can't do that. The Gnosis people, on the other hand, would have said, well, no worries, we'll keep the God stuff in our Sunday box, nicely stashed away, and we work in it when we are together on Sunday and when we have our religious experience. But no worries, we'll do in our everyday life box, we do exactly the same as you do, so we won't have any trouble with it. That's what Gnosis says. But Incarnation says, God takes human life, our human lives, your human life, my human life, serious. He took it serious enough so that he has become a human being as well. One of my favorite movies is The Firm. Anybody saw The Firm? Tom Cruise played in it. It's a little bit of an old movie. Tells a little bit about my age as well. I know, but it's a very good movie after a book of John Grisham. And in the movie, Tom Cruise is a young lawyer that comes out of law school, and he is enticed by a law firm in a smaller city to come and work for them, and he gets paid royally. He gets all kinds of perks, and he gets a loan to purchase a house, and he takes his young wife, and he lives in this city, and just everything is just wonderful, better than he ever could think of. And it is not long before he starts finding out that this law firm that lured him into that affluence is just not a normal law firm, but it is a setup of a law firm that takes care of the interest of the mob, the mafia. And they launder money for the mafia, they protect their legal interests, they set up tons of shell companies in tax havens to kind of hide the money and make it very difficult to trace the money. And they defend mafia leaders in court. And when he finds out, he finds himself in a very difficult situation of murder, of affluence, of the FBI chasing him and wanting him to recruit him so that they could roll up this firm. Now, one basic message from what I take away from The Firm is the fact that when things are too good to be true, they most likely are too good to be true. Yeah, when you are getting out of law school and right away you earn a fortune, then probably that's too good to be true. But I've also said this many times to clients of mine that came up with tax schemes and founding a company in Crete to forego taxes in the Netherlands and stuff like that. This is something that I sometimes said to them to warn them. When things are too good to be true, they most likely are too good to be true. It's just the case. There's no easy way to become rich. There is no legal way to dodge taxes. There is no simple way to become a saint. There is no shortcut to character. There is no free ride to meaningful glory. Some things are just too good to be true. And I think many times the church is guilty of portraying something to the people that there's a shortcut to glory. There's no shortcut to glory. It involves hard work, dedication, and a life of faithfulness. The false teachers that John is talking about are teaching that there are deep spiritual Christian experiences to be had, but still be able to live like someone without God, like a heathen. There's forgiveness and glory without suffering, and there's revelation without incarnation. But John says there is no such thing. Faith that tickles you all the time and makes you feel good is too good to be true. Faith that always makes you comfortable and makes you feel happy is too good to be true, because I have found through all the years that I've been following Jesus is that often he makes me very uncomfortable when he comes in and speaks to me. And if you've got a different experience, maybe you're not getting the message that Jesus is sometimes trying to communicate to you. Because he likes to upset our lives and make us look at it in a different way. In the Message, the first verses of this passage are translated like this. It says, "My dear friends, don't believe everything you hear. Carefully weigh and examine what people tell you. Not everything who talks about God comes from God." So when you and I make decisions in life, what do we base our decisions on? Decisions about career and direction. Decisions about lifestyle. Decisions about choosing a partner. Decisions about whether we live together before marriage or not. Decisions about sexuality. Decisions on how and on what we spend our money. We are prone to look for license for what we feel like doing. Every one of us. The question is, are we willing to hear from God? Because not every thought we might entertain is necessarily from God. Not everything that feels good is necessarily good. Not everything that is acceptable to our cultural norms in 2020 is what God approves of. When we become Christians, we surrender our lives to Jesus. That's what we often said. We confess him as Lord. That implies that we are no longer the ultimate boss of our lives, but that we acknowledge that there is someone who has greater authority and we should follow his lead on the things in our lives. And yes, he has things to say about many areas of our lives. And sometimes it is totally countercultural from what we learn from the world around us. That was true for the world that John wrote to in the first century. That is still true for 2020 in the year that we live in now. Some of it is totally countercultural. Am I willing to let Jesus be the Lord of my life? Even if it rubs against the culture. So incarnation tells us that there is no religious and a non-religious box separately from each other. By Jesus becoming a human being heaven touch the earth so that my earth, your earth, becomes heaven on earth, in which Jesus becomes part of my everyday life. Let's pray together. Lord, as we read the words of 1 John, we are reminded that you have come to live among us, experience exactly the same things as we experience, so that you can be a high priest for us that knows what we're going through. And Lord, I pray that you will give us the courage to approach your word and your Spirit speaking in our lives, so that we come under the authority of your Spirit and the authority of your word, and that we accept that you have things to say about our lives here and now. And Lord, I pray that we will all find the courage to have you speak in our lives, to have you minister in our lives, so that we will let Jesus be the Lord of our lives, and that more and more we will crown him with the glory and the honor that's due to him by obeying what his word is telling us. Lord, will you help us to live as lighting examples in this day and age of people of civility, people of courage, people of nobleness, that are taking their cue from the Master in heaven. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.